4 chilling pit stop tales that will leave you uneasy. Welcome to Mr. Quentin's Chilling Tales. Picture this, you're on a quiet road trip, the air filled with nothing but the hum of your engine and the promise of adventure. Suddenly, you stop for a quick break, but what happens next isn't part of your plan. From eerie encounters at abandoned gas stations to mysterious strangers lurking in the shadows, these stories will make you think twice before your next pit stop. Join us as we dive into 4 chilling pit stop tales that will leave you uneasy. Stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, some stops aren't worth the risk. Story 1. A pit stop nightmare. I never thought an ordinary day on my commute to work would turn into a nightmare I couldn't forget. I'm a 39-year-old traveling salesman, and my job often requires me to drive across multiple states. That night, the darkness felt heavier than usual, and the headlights from my pickup truck were the only thing slicing through the pitch-black desert near Las Cruces, New Mexico. The barren landscape, typically serene, carried an unnerving silence that night, as if the stillness itself was forewarning something ominous. Feeling drained after a long day, I pulled into a small roadside rest stop to recharge. The area was desolate, illuminated only by the flickering light of a faulty lamppost, which seemed to flash like a warning beacon. As I stepped out of my truck, the biting cold air sent a shiver through me, an unsettling contrast to the stillness around. Heading towards the restroom, I was interrupted by a voice calling out from the other side of the parking lot. "Hey, sir, can you help me?" The voice belonged to a middle-aged man, stocky and dressed in a shabby coat. He stood near an old beat-up sedan and waved at me frantically. "My car's broken down!" he shouted, his words carried faintly by the wind. Something about him immediately set off alarm bells in my mind. His shifty eyes darted around, and his posture felt unnatural, as if he was ready to pounce. But what truly unnerved me was the shadow of a second person lurking in the darkness behind the sedan. Though I couldn't make out their features, the presence of another figure was undeniable. "What seems to be the problem with your car?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. The man hesitated before gesturing vaguely toward the hood of his car. "It won't start," he mumbled. Yet, oddly, the engine bay showed no signs of being opened or worked on, and the air was eerily quiet. No clicks, no whirring, no failed attempts to crank the engine. I instinctively stepped back, the unease growing stronger. "Sorry, I'm not good with cars," I said curtly, maintaining a cautious distance. His face tightened, and his pleas grew more desperate. "Please, it's just a quick look," he insisted, his tone shifting, almost demanding. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The shadowy figure began to creep around the car, inching closer to me. A chill raced down my spine as I realized this was no simple request for help. "I can't help you," I stated firmly, taking another step back toward my truck. My voice was steady, but my heart pounded against my chest. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked swiftly to my vehicle, my every nerve screaming at me not to run. When I reached my truck, I slammed the door shut and locked it, glancing quickly at the two figures. They stood motionless, their faces obscured by shadows, but the eyes gleamed with something predatory in the dim light. I drove away, my hands gripping the wheel tightly, but my relief was short-lived. A few minutes later, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rear-view mirror. The same sedan was following me, its lights piercing the darkness like predatory eyes. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. They weren't letting me go. I pressed the accelerator, trying to keep a safe distance, but they matched my speed. The high beams from their car reflected harshly in my mirrors, blinding me intermittently. The isolated road stretched endlessly before me, and every second felt like an eternity. I couldn't shake the terrifying scenarios running through my mind. Would they force me off the road? What would they do if they caught up to me? Just when I thought panic might overwhelm me, I saw the welcoming glow of a larger rest stop ahead. This one was bustling with activity. Bright lights, a gas station, and a small diner. I veered into the parking lot, my truck skidding slightly on the asphalt as I parked near the entrance. The sedan hesitated at the edge of the lot, then turned around and disappeared into the night. I sat in my truck, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. My hands, still gripping the wheel, felt frozen. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with a lingering dread. I had escaped, but the encounter left an indelible mark. The image of those two figures, the calculating stares, and the sinister quiet of that desolate rest stop haunted me long after that night. To this day, I'm more cautious on the road. I avoid isolated stops and trust my instincts when something feels off. Yet, no matter how much time passes, the memory of that night lingers. A chilling reminder that danger can lurk where you least expect it. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to MR.Quentin and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Good luck sleeping tonight. Story 2. Disturbing pit stop horror stories. The Tracker and the Lockbreaker. It all started as just another long haul. I'd been on the road for hours, my eyes glued to the dark highway stretching endlessly ahead. The loneliness of the open road has always been my companion. But that night, I felt something different. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and my hands tightened on the wheel as though bracing for something unseen. An unease crept over me, like a shadow I couldn't shake, whispering that I wasn't alone out today. I chalked it up to exhaustion, my usual excuse for the strange whispers of the night. I was somewhere near Salt Lake City, Utah, when my gas gauge caught my eye, almost empty. A pit stop was inevitable, and I spotted a dimly lit truck stop a few miles up ahead. It wasn't much to look at, just a single pump and a small convenience store with a flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24/7. The lot was mostly empty, save for a couple of other rigs and an old beat-up sedan parked at the edge of the lot. The sedan's paint was peeling, and one of its tires looked dangerously low. The windows were tinted so dark, they seemed to absorb the faint glow of the truck stop's lights. It sat there like a lurking predator, silent and unmoving, its very presence sending a shiver down my spine. It was the kind of place you'd only stop if you had no other choice. I pulled in, parked my rig, and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt oppressive, almost too heavy. Still, I shrugged it off, grabbed my thermos, and climbed down to stretch my legs. The air was crisp, biting even, and the scent of diesel lingered thickly in the atmosphere. I glanced around, taking in my surroundings. The sedan hadn't moved. Its windows were tinted dark, and I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. Something about it made me uneasy. but I told myself to stop being paranoid. After topping off my tank, I climbed back into my cab and locked the doors. I've been in the trucking game long enough to know you don't take chances, not even in a seemingly quiet spot like this. Still, sleep was calling, and the thought of a few hours' rest sounded better than anything else. Reclining my seat, I shut my eyes and let the rhythm of the idling engine lull me. But I didn't sleep for long. It started with a noise, a faint metallic clinking, irregular and sharp, like something tapping deliberately against metal. It barely cut through the steady hum of the engine, but its unnatural rhythm sent a jolt of tension down my spine. It wasn't the wind, nor something loose. This sound was intentional, calculated, and utterly out of place in the oppressive silence of the night. At first I thought it was just the wind rattling something loose, but the sound grew louder, more deliberate. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding. It was coming from the back of the truck where my trailer was secured. Grabbing my flashlight, I cautiously stepped out into the cold night, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Each step felt heavier than the last as I fought the urge to retreat back to the safety of my cab. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, and the icy air bit at my skin, amplifying the growing fear that I might be walking straight into danger. I clutched the flashlight tighter, its beam trembling as much as my hands, and steeled myself to face whatever awaited me in the dark. My boots crunched against the gravel as I rounded the side of the truck. That's when I saw it, the beam of a flashlight sweeping across my trailer's padlock. And then, a second light. Two figures were hunched near the rear doors, their backs turned to me. They hadn't noticed me yet, too preoccupied with whatever tool they were using to jimmy the lock. My stomach tightened. This wasn't the first time I'd heard stories of cargo theft, but I'd never been a target myself. I wanted to call out to demand that they stop, but something held me back. Instead, I picked up a nearby rock and hurled it toward the sedan. The loud clang it made against the car's hood was enough to send the would-be thieves scrambling. Their flashlights bobbed wildly as they bolted for the sedan, jumping in and peeling out of the lot without so much as a glance back. I stood there, flashlight trembling in my hand, the adrenaline coursing through me like wildfire. As their tail lights disappeared into the distance, I finally allowed myself to breathe. But the unease lingered, stronger now than before. A quick inspection of the trailer revealed they'd barely managed to scratch the lock. It was still intact, though there were clear signs they'd been working on it for a while. My heart sank as I spotted their tools. A crowbar, bolt cutters, and what looked like a lock-picking kit, abandoned in their haste. I'd caught them just in time. By now, the commotion had drawn the attention of one of the other truckers parked nearby. A burly man in his late 40s approached, his expression equal parts curiosity and concern. I explained what had happened, and he nodded grimly. "You're lucky," he said. "These guys don't usually run unless they're spooked. You did the right thing by not confronting them directly." The police arrived not long after, summoned by a quick call from the truck stop's clerk. They took my statement, examined the tools, and assured me they'd keep an eye out for the suspects. But as they drove off, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I double-checked the lock, climbed back into my cab, and sat there, staring out into the darkness, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if I hadn't woken up in time? What if they'd gotten into the trailer, or worse? What if they decided to come after me instead? That night changed me. I've always been cautious, but now I'm paranoid. I don't just lock my doors, I double and triple check them. Every shadow, every noise, every passing car feels like a potential threat. The road is still my livelihood, but it's no longer my sanctuary. Each night, I find myself triple checking my locks, scanning every lot for unfamiliar faces, and sleeping with one hand near the door latch. My once comfortable routines have turned into rituals of paranoia, parking only in well-lit areas, avoiding stops that feel too quiet, and always keeping a weapon within reach. What used to feel like freedom now feels like a battleground. Every pit stop a calculated risk. The open road hasn't changed, but I have. And I don't know if I'll ever feel safe out here again. And every time I pull into a truck stop, I can't help but wonder who's watching me, who's out there, waiting for their next victim. So, to anyone's out there, driving through the long, lonely highways of America, take it from me, stay vigilant. The darkness hides more than just the night. And sometimes, it's not just about what's in your trailer. It's about who's willing to cross any line to take it. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to MR.Quentin and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3. The Stranger at the Gas Station, a night I can never forget. I still remember that night vividly. The crisp autumn air wrapped around me as I drove my small sedan down the winding highway, the radio playing faint country tunes to keep me company. I was a teacher on my way back to Columbus, Ohio, from a weekend spent visiting family in a sleepy little town. The journey was supposed to be uneventful, but fate had other plans. It started when I realized I needed gas. The fuel gauge's needle had dipped lower than I'd expected, and the nearest gas station was one of those old, almost abandoned-looking ones that seemed ripped straight out of a horror movie. The peeling paint on the sign flickered under the dim, buzzing neon light that struggled to stay on. Reluctantly, I pulled in. The place was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. As I stepped out of the car, the cold air sent a shiver down my spine. The pump was ancient, requiring a visit inside the dingy little convenience store to prepay. The clerk barely acknowledged me, a hunched-over man with thick glasses and a grim expression. He grunted when I told him how much I wanted on the pump too. His disinterest was almost a comfort. Until I noticed another man in the corner of the store. He was tall, wiry, with unkempt hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze locked onto me the moment I entered, and it didn't waver. His clothes were disheveled, a stained plaid shirt and faded jeans that seemed to have seen better days. There was something off about him, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore him, paying quickly and retreating to the pump. But as I filled my tank, I felt his eyes. Turning slightly, I caught him standing just outside the store now, leaning against the wall as if he had nowhere better to be. He lit a cigarette, the glow of it briefly illuminating his face in the dark. His stare was unrelenting, and my stomach churned with unease. "Hey, miss, long drive?" His voice cut through the night, startling me. It was gravelly and too familiar for someone I'd never met. "Yes," I replied curtly, hoping my tone would discourage further conversation. But he didn't take the hint. "Where you headed?" he asked, stepping closer. His movements were slow, almost predatory. My hands tightened on the pump handle as I forced myself to stay calm. "Home," I said, not elaborating. He chuckled softly, the sound unnervingly hollow. Not many people stop here at this hour. You gotta be careful out there. Never know who you'll run into. I didn't respond, finishing up and climbing back into my car. As I drove off, I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes burning into my back. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him standing by the pump I'd just used, watching me. My skin crawled. About 5 minutes down the road, the headlights appeared. At first, I thought it was just another car coincidentally heading the same way. But when I changed lanes, it changed too. When I sped up, so did it. My heart began to race as I realized the old pickup truck behind me was tailing me deliberately. Memories of the man's unsettling grin flashed through my mind. I kept glancing in the mirror, hoping I was wrong, hoping he'd turn off somewhere. But he didn't. He stayed close, uncomfortably close, his headlights flooding my car's interior with a blinding glare. Panic clawed at my chest. My mind raced, trying to think of what to do. The highway was desolate, no other cars in sight, and the truck behind me felt like a predator, closing in on its prey. My thoughts spiraled. What does he want? Was this planned? Did he follow me to the gas station? I spotted the sign for an upcoming rest area. It was my only hope. I veered off the highway abruptly, my tires screeching as I pulled into the well-lit parking lot. There were a few cars parked there, and a family, a father, mother, and 2 children, stood near their minivan, stretching their legs. I didn't even park properly. I just stopped the car near them and jumped out, rushing over. "Excuse me, I think someone's following me," I blurted out, my voice trembling. The father looked at me with concern, then toward the entrance of the rest area. The pickup truck had pulled in, stopping at the edge of the lot. The man inside stared at us for a long moment before, finally, he reversed and sped off into the night. The family stayed with me until I calmed down. The father even offered to follow me partway to make sure I was safe. Though shaken, I accepted, and eventually I made it home without further incident. For days after, I couldn't shake the fear. Every shadow seemed darker, every stranger's glance felt too long. I kept wondering what might have happened if I hadn't stopped at the rest area, if that family hadn't been there. The thought still sends chills down my spine. Sometimes I replay the events in my mind, and I can't help but think of the man's words. "You gotta be careful out there. Never know who you'll run into." It's as if he knew something I didn't, as if he was toying with me, enjoying my fear. And now, every time I drive at night, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, haunted by the memory of that man's unsettling smile and the quiet menace in his voice. The paranoia has settled into my bones, and no matter how much I try to shake it, I'll always wonder, was he still watching me somewhere out there in the dark? Story 4. The Rest Stop Stalker. It was supposed to be an ordinary drive. I was heading through the winding back roads of North Carolina, my car's headlights cutting through the inky blackness of the night. The trip had been quiet, almost too quiet, with only the hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of crickets to break the silence. Somewhere between towns, the coffee I had chugged earlier demanded my attention. Reluctantly, I pulled into a dimly lit rest area. The air was thick and heavy as I stepped out of my car. The silence outside more oppressive than inside. The faint rustle of leaves in the nearby woods sounded unnervingly loud in the stillness, and the distant croak of a frog echoed like a warning. The faint glow of a half-moon barely illuminated the jagged outlines of trees that loomed around the rest area, making the shadows feel alive and watchful. The rest area was a forgotten relic of the past, with its cracked pavement and flickering fluorescent lights. Only a single car sat in the parking lot, its windows dark and its owner unseen. I hesitated, my instincts urging me to get back in the car and find another place, but the pressure in my bladder refused to compromise. The restroom was cold, the tile floors sticky underfoot. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, their flickering casting unsettling shadows that danced across the cracked mirrors. Each step echoed unnervingly, as if the room itself were alive and mocking my intrusion. I chose the stall farthest from the entrance, the one that felt the most shielded from the strange, hollow atmosphere. Something about the isolation of that corner stall gave me a false sense of security, like being out of sight meant being out of danger. It was an irrational comfort, as if the flimsy metal door could somehow keep whatever was out there at bay, granting me a fleeting illusion of control in an otherwise unnerving place. As I sat there, the door to the restroom creaked open. I froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed through the room. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was in here with me. I could see their shadow under the stall door, long and distorted by the flickering light. They stopped just in front of my stall. I held my breath as the handle of the stall door jiggled violently, the metal rattling against its frame with a sharp, grating sound that sent a chill down my spine. My fingers dug into my knees, nails biting into my skin as I fought to stay silent. Each jolt of the handle felt like an electric shock, and my chest tightened, suffocating me with the fear of what might come next. My heart raced, the sound of my blood pounding in my ears. Whoever it was didn't say a word, didn't make a sound. The silence was worse than anything they could have said. I whispered, occupied, my voice trembling. The jiggling stopped. The shadow lingered for a moment longer before retreating. I stayed there, paralyzed, until I could no longer hear the footsteps. Finally, I mustered the courage to leave the stall. Peering cautiously around the corner, I found the restroom empty. My hands shook as I washed them, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, expecting the stranger to reappear. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Stepping outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap, the sudden openness feeling both relief and a new kind of vulnerability. The stark contrast to the suffocating, claustrophobic restroom was disorienting. The rustling of leaves in the faint chirp of crickets in the distance only added to my unease. It felt as though the shadows of the surrounding trees stretched out toward me, their unseen depths hiding countless threats. The freedom of the open air was a cruel illusion. I still wasn't safe. I'd hoped the open space would calm my nerves, but it only heightened my unease. That's when I saw him, a man standing near my car. He was tall, his face obscured by the brim of a baseball cap, his posture unnervingly still. He was waiting for me. I forced myself to walk towards the car, every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. As I got closer, he took a step forward. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. My mouth was dry, my voice barely above a whisper when I said, "No, I'm fine." He stepped closer, too close. "Are you sure?" There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. My keys were already in my hand, and I gripped them tightly, ready to use them as a weapon if necessary. "Yes," I said, more firmly this time. I darted around him, unlocking the car door and sliding in. My hands fumbled to lock the doors as he tapped on the window. I didn't wait to hear what he had to say. I started the engine, my tires screeching as I sped out of the lot. My heart didn't stop racing until I reached a truck stop, bustling with people. The neon lights of the diner felt like a sanctuary. Inside, surrounded by truckers and travelers, I finally felt safe enough to call the police. I reported the incident, describing the man and the unsettling encounter. The officer on the other end of the line was sympathetic but realistic. Without a crime being committed or more information about the man, there was little they could do. That night, as I sat in the diner nursing a cup of coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something far worse. My mind replayed the encounter in agonizing detail. The jiggling handle, the shadow beneath the stall, the man's unrelenting stillness by my car. I thought about what my mother used to say about trusting your instincts, and a wave of guilt washed over me for not leaving that rest stop the moment I'd felt it uneasy. What if I hadn't been quick enough? What if I'd frozen when he approached? The questions coiled around my thoughts like a predator waiting to strike, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I could almost feel his presence again. Watching, waiting. The coffee grew cold in my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to move, trapped in the aftermath of my own terror. The man's face, what little I could see of it, haunted me. There was something almost inhuman about his stillness, his persistence. Even now, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that stall a moment longer. What would have happened if I hadn't gotten away? They never found him. But sometimes, when I drive through North Carolina, I can't help but glance at the rest stops and wonder if he's still out there, waiting for someone else to make the same mistake. As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to MR.Quentin now and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of MR, Quentin are always waiting and they never rest. Good luck sleeping tonight.